idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Spice presents the League About Nothing podcast.
All right, everyone, welcome back to episode 7. We have our week 3 review. Another exciting week of scoring, up in the 200s for our league median this week. Not quite the fireworks we had in week 2 across the NFL, but there were some extraordinary games in a couple of select locations.
Certainly fireworks in Miami.
Yeah, not just Miami, but in Minnesota as well.
Yes, but there were more fireworks in Miami.
That's true.
That's
true.
the
That's
most
fair.
fireworks I've ever seen.
the most fireworks since 1960-something?
I wasn't alive then, so the most that I've seen in my lifetime.
That was one heck of a showing. To start us off, we're gonna do what we normally do. We're gonna recap the waiver wire and any trades that have taken place. And last week we had no trades that had taken place. We put out the call for everybody to do better. Happy to report that one manager has managed to keep the entire league's trade market afloat. Thank you, Big.
Somebody answered the bell.
Unfortunately, there was one waiver claim last week, so we don't have anything to cover there. Hopefully we get some more action next week.
You mean you don't want to discuss Zach Pascal for one fab?
I figured we'd save it for the end. That's what everyone's really looking forward to the most.
Oh, like a teaser. All right. Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll get to waivers at the end. Stay tuned.
So as I said before, we are happy to report that there was some action on the trade market. As you may have noticed, Big decided to put his entire 24 draft class on the trade block. And a very short while later, we had a couple of trades done.
We should really discuss the thought process behind this move. Big has started out hot. He wasn't planning to be one of the major competitors this year, but he started out scorching hot. And this week, yet another huge performance from his team. So it seems like he decided, well, maybe this is going to blossom a year early, and he decided to push his chips in and really go for it.
It's a smart move to capitalize when you start off the season 5-1. You have the second highest points in the league this week, and your team just looks like all the young guys have shown up big right away.
Pun intended.
Yeah, so Big sees the position that he's in, sees the state of the rest of the league dealing with a just massive amount of injuries across the board on teams that look like they were contenders. And he decides, well, he's got that extra capital and may as well put it to use now and see what he can do.
I think it was the right decision. I mean, his team is very deep. It was very deep, and he made a flurry of trades to make it even deeper, add some high-end talent as well. It makes sense. You never know when your window is going to open, and it's always better to be in position to take advantage of it.
So I agree about the depth of his team, and I like the moves that he made. I thought he got good value. I thought he added impact pieces. The one reservation that I have about this move is that he's not super deep, or I'm just going to say it. I don't think he's super talented at the quarterback position. Obviously, he's got Kyler Murray, who's out injured right now. But outside of Kyler, you got Baker Mayfield, Desmond Ridder, and he's got Josh Dobbs, who's filling in the interim for Kyler. But none of those names really inspire a ton of confidence in me. It's clearly not been an issue thus far. He's produced well without needing them. So I guess I shouldn't be that worried about it.
That's the benefit of best ball. He's built a very best ball driven quarterback room. Just grab a bunch of guys, a bunch of mid-level guys, and hope that you get one or two decent performances out of the group every week. So far, it's worked out fine, and he will be adding Kyler to that group at some point. So he will have a ceiling.
Yeah, when Kyler comes back, he's got an added element that he just doesn't have right now, where you could have that really big boom game from your quarterback. And that'll be a good boost to the lineup. I just worry that You look at his lineup this week, his super flex spot was filled by James Cook. I mean, if James Cook had a great game, it was a 14.7. If that's your lowest scoring position player that's going to fit into your super flex, you don't even need a second quarterback half the time.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's a super flex, not a 2-quarterback league. So you don't have to start 2 quarterbacks every week. If he doesn't have 2 decent quarterback scores, there's a chance that someone else on his roster can pick up that slack and get in that super flex spot. He's been accumulating assets all offseason. He's done a lot of these kind of 2-for-1, 3-for-1 trades where he's taking on additional assets to the point where in some of these trades, he was shedding players just to be able to get back to the roster limit, but replacing them with much higher upside options.
I don't know what you're talking about. Sterling Shepard was the centerpiece of that trade.
I know that you're a Giants fan, but you may be taking this homerism too far.
All right, so before we get too deep into analyzing Big's roster on a whole, let's cover what these trades were. The first trade that was done was between Big and myself, wherein I traded away Michael Thomas and Big sent out a 2024 second-round pick, his own pick, and Sterling Shepard. Pretty standard wide receiver for draft pick swap with a much lesser wide receiver thrown into the mix.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your rationale from your side. What was the impetus to trade Michael Thomas at this point? He's put together a couple of good weeks now.
That was the impetus. No, so I acquired Thomas last year in a trade after he had been injured and basically done for the year. The trade with JMC where I sent out Amari Cooper and Richie James, I should say, and Jarvis Landry as well. And I got back Romeo Doubs, Matthew Stafford, Michael Thomas, and Guyton. I've been holding Thomas this whole time. I just very much worry that he's going to get re-injured and then I'd be left with an asset that's basically useless after having been injured so many times over the last few years. Like you said, he's playing well now. He's put together a solid season, and I honestly hope he continues to do so for Big's sake. Basically acquiring Thomas at the time with the intention to trade him later on once he started producing. And he started producing, so I was interested in moving him.
To me, it signaled that maybe you were looking to start selling, but your record would suggest otherwise. Sitting at the top of the standings, I wouldn't expect you to be trading useful vets away for picks after acquiring the vets for picks all offseason.
Yeah, it's a little bit counterintuitive, I suppose. I definitely need help in the wide receiver room still, so I probably shouldn't be trading away the veterans. And in fact, I traded for DeAndre Hopkins from Big earlier in the offseason, like you mentioned. I felt like it was a good offer for Thomas. I probably am never going to get a second round pick if he gets injured again. I just felt like it was time to get out.
It makes sense. It's difficult to straddle that line when you're a maybe competitor, maybe not. You've been kind of a fringe playoff team the whole time that we've been looking at this since we did the draft recap roster review last few weeks. Your playoff odds are hovering right around 50-ish, 60-ish%, even with the hot 5-1 start. Your points aren't great. You've kind of been skirting by winning some close, low-scoring matchups. So it makes sense to kind of straddle the fence a little bit, give yourself some flexibility. If things continue going well, you have picks. You can always buy players again. There'll always be players for sale later. At least the second-round pick in the meantime can't get hurt and fall off a value cliff.
Exactly. It's one of those where if there's a good value, I'm going to take it regardless of whether it looks like it increases or decreases my chances this year, mostly because I'm not in that top tier of contender where I need to worry about what's happening this year. And Big, after a couple of massive weeks, looks like he is in that tier. So he's willing to spend those picks and buy, which makes perfect sense.
Right. It was a very smart move for him to kind of stabilize his very young and probably up and down receiver room. a lot of youth in the wide receiver room, and those guys tend to be not as steady week to week. So Michael Thomas definitely helps bring up his floor, because we know what Michael Thomas is going to do at this point. He's going to get his 7 to 10 targets every week, and he's going to compile 6 for 60, 7 for 80, something like that, where he's going to give you a good baseline every week. And those are important pieces if you want to be an actual top tier contending team. You need those kind of guys.
And speaking of acquiring veteran wide receivers, that was not the only trade he made to do so. Let's talk about your trade, wherein Big acquired Calvin Ridley and Zach Ertz for a 2024 first, a 2024 fourth, and De'Ami Brown and Jalen Tolbert.
Well, I could see that Big was serious about buying. Yeah, at first when he put everybody on the block, I wasn't sure if he was just doing his normal posturing that he likes to do in our chat to get attention. Once I saw him actually make a trade. How dare
you?
Once I saw him actually make a trade with you, of all people, I've seen the two of your trade negotiations live in person in the DM, so I know how those normally go.
We've negotiated trades in a 3-person chat in front of you before, yeah.
Yep, I've seen them, so I know I know how those usually go. So when that trade got done, I knew that he was serious. I looked at his team. What does he really need? He's got a deep team, but he was lacking, some stuff to make him a real, true contender. And so I started with Zach Ertz because he's got good young tight ends, but it's a very shallow roster. I said, well, let's see if I can give him a veteran tight end that can kind of raise that floor. If one of the rookies has a rookie game where they just disappear, it happens from time to time from rookie players. That evolved into Calvin Ridley somehow. The real big missing piece was a kind of a wide receiver one, that alpha role for that team. He's got a lot of good young supporting receivers. He really needed somebody that could be a wide receiver one, and that's what Calvin Ridley gives him. And then on my end, same with you. I'm just looking for the liquidity, the flexibility of the pick. There's a good chance that this pick is not going to last long on my roster. It will probably be going to someone else shortly, like most of the picks that I acquire. But for the meantime, I preferred to have the flexibility and see what kind of players are going to be coming available later once people start to really sell in earnest and teams really start throwing in the towel on the season. There may be players available that I like more than Calvin Ridley, so I thought it was a fair value. Chances are a rebuilder is not going to want Calvin Ridley. They may prefer a first-round pick instead. If the value is close enough, then I'll take the pick for now.
He made a third trade to strengthen that running back room. The third trade that Big made was with Benign Rug, wherein Big acquired Kareem Hunt, James Conner, and Josh Palmer for 2024 second and third round picks, and Cedric Tillman and the corpse of Darrell Henderson. And we can exclusively reveal here that Big tried 3 times to give away Darrell Henderson there before he was successful.
He definitely tried to include him in my trade. And I assume he tried to include him in yours as well.
Yep, the name did come up, in fact.
And then we discussed him in the chat about how he was still sitting in the green room with Leonard Fournette and James Robinson. But he found someone to take him. I assume that
for the time being.
I assume that he wasn't really pushing the value needle for Benign Rug. I'm assuming the picks were the big sell for him, because we had discussed James Conner trade earlier in the offseason as well for similar pricing. I'm assuming that's what he was really looking for. Seems like Benign Rug is the only one outside of, well, obviously Georgia Mike, that's actually willing to throw the towel in on this year and collect picks and trade some of these vets. So this was a good deal for both sides. I think he got the picks that he wanted, and then Big got a more veteran depth. And I'm sure it doesn't hurt to have more Arizona Cardinals. Has every single Arizona Cardinal that you can possibly roster in fantasy on his team.
Well, he had to get Ertz, obviously from you.
That's why I started with Ertz. I knew that would be a big sell for him.
He picks up Hunt and Connor to shore up that running back room. And Palmer is looking like he's going to be in for a larger role with the unfortunate injury to Mike Williams.
Yeah, we'll get into that injury momentarily. This could be a huge value swing for Palmer. He could end up being a very important part of this trade. He was already playing ahead of Quentin Johnston when Mike Williams was healthy. Now they're both going to be pressed into heavy action with Mike Williams out.
Certainly a situation worth watching there. I think that about wraps up our big section of the podcast here, where we cover nothing but one man's trades for the first 20 minutes. Everyone else, do better and you'll get your own section.
Yeah, Big told me he was only making these moves for content for us, so I truly appreciate that.
Yeah, we both do. Yep.
Yeah. He wasn't actually trying to improve his team at all. He was just trying to improve the podcast, and we sincerely appreciate that.
So as we mentioned just a couple minutes ago, we had a couple injuries in the league this week. Nothing landscape altering, but
So that's Mr. Good News. Lost another player to IR.
yeah, Mike Williams with the unfortunate ACL tear in the game against Minnesota, going to be out for the year. He's 28 years old. It's going to be a tough recovery for him, and even if he comes back quickly, it's probably him being done as a major fantasy asset.
And he's got a massive cap hit next year to the point where he's unlikely to be retained by the Chargers, even if he was healthy. I think his cap hit is like $30 million next year, so there's no way they were going to be able to afford to bring him back at that rate. It's possible they bring him back on a 1 year kind of restructure, prove it deal, prove his health. So it's possible he comes back. He's probably looking at free agency too, which is not ideal coming off ACL.
The only other major injury worthy of note was Derek Carr with the shoulder. Left the game against Green Bay, which is unfortunate because they ended up losing that game shortly thereafter. Winston unable to move the team down the field to even run the clock. Prognosis on Carr, they said he was week to week with the shoulder injury. Not sure how long that'll take, but certainly a downgrade for the passing game in his absence.
Potentially a big injury. It looks like an AC sprain, similar to what Brandon Ayuk had. Those can be anywhere from 1 to 4 week injuries if he's on the longer end of that time scale. We've seen Jameis Winston be ineffective in recent years as a fill-in starter. So it's not quite Tampa Bay Jameis, although he does get to play Tampa Bay this week. So maybe
the revenge game.
Maybe he'll rekindle some of that magic, the narrative-driven revenge game. For us with Saints receivers, we certainly hope so.
You don't think he's going to recapture the magic of his 30 and 30 season?
I mean, for fantasy, I don't care how many interceptions he throws. That just means to get the ball back quicker.
Well, only if they're pick sixes.
Fair point.
The other one I want to just mention briefly, the Ravens backfield continues to be cursed. Gus Edwards with the concussion. Obviously, Justice Hill missing this week. It's just comical. They can't keep anyone healthy back there.
Someone get Melvin Gordon the Secret Service assignment.
A drummer from Spinal Tap levels.
Yeah, it's been like that for a few years now, unfortunately.
Yeah. So hopefully
that's how we're down to Melvin Gordon and Kenyon Drake in the year 2023.
So hopefully we get back Carr and Gus Edwards relatively soon, and hopefully Mike Williams has a good recovery from the ACL. But in comparison to the last 2 weeks, this was a down week for injuries. We're a little bit calmer on that front.
Again, tell that to Mr. Good News. Small solace for him.
Yeah. The good news for Mr. Good News is that on his way out the door, Mike Williams did have a pretty solid game for him, which helped propel him to the third highest score in the league this week.
Hey, spoiler alert. Supposed to start with the highest scoring game.
Oh, my apologies. Well, let's get to that highest score then. The league median this week was 204.03. So anyone above that, you get your bonus win. Anyone below that, cut to clip.
Cue the sounder.
Bonus. Lost. So the top score this week was a 279.56 from Judd, who outscored Mel finishing with a 215.71.
Poor Mel.
He
What
just keeps
luck.
running into a buzzsaw
Unbelievable.
every
It's
week.
every week it's the same thing.
The good news for Mel is that he was above the median this week. He gets the bonus win. He's on the board.
He's off the schneid.
Just an absolute monster performance from Judd. It actually puts him into the top 10 all time for scores in our league. This one will slide in at number 10, but still a very impressive week. As we discussed, there was some fireworks in Miami and some fireworks in Minnesota, and Judd managed to capture both of those games on his roster. He had a 54.96 performance from Keenan Allen and a 45.7 performance from Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, those two players alone outscored Georgia Mike's entire roster this week. Massive performances.
Those two players outscored my entire redraft lineup this week.
Those were two wild games. Good for fantasy. Not so good if you are a actual NFL fan of the losing teams.
Yeah, both of them, a lot of points on the board. At least the Chargers and the Vikings was a close run contest where even right up till the very end, the outcome was in doubt. So theoretically, both fan bases could be enjoying it along the way.
Can we talk about how that game ended for a minute? I need to.
Sure, go for it.
It was the most Chargery Viking game that you could possibly have, with both teams trying their hardest to lose that game.
It never fails.
The Chargers' decision to go for it on 4th and 1 inside their own 20 with like a minute left. Fine. I love the aggression. I'm all for it. But the play call, a slow developing run up the middle, when that is what the defense is keyed on. What are you doing, Brandon Staley?
It's one of my biggest pet peeves is when you have a high leverage situation like that and the defense is super, super keyed up and ready to go, and you call a slow developing play.
Up the middle.
No,
like where all the defense is on 4th and 1.
Just inexcusable.
And somehow the Vikings
somehow it didn't matter.
Inside the red zone. And I don't understand what happened. They got
the clock management
got a first down, and then instead of clocking the ball
just
like
get up and spike it,
human being would do, I'm assuming that this was from the coach, because
do you not recall when he went to spike the ball and took a knee instead? I don't know that I trust him.
You could see Kirk Cousins was clearly trying to get the play call in from the sidelines. He's running around tapping his helmet, saying he can't hear. The Vikings fans are going crazy, so he can't hear anything. Good job, Vikings fans. Way to smart. Way to pay attention to the game. And they end up running like 90% of their clock out to the point where they only had one more play, which then was,
well, he never got the call in. If you heard afterwards, he made the call.
He had to call his own play.
Yeah,
which was an interception, and that was the end of that game.
Not the best.
That was about as Charger Viking ending as you could possibly get.
I'll have you know that I looked at that game for about 10 minutes in my sportsbook app, and I finally settled on a bet that did hit. It was the Vikings plus 7.5 and the Chargers plus 7.5. I said there is no way this game does not finish as a 1-score game.
Oh yeah, of course.
So that was, I think the final odds on that were like minus 120, but I felt pretty comfortable with it.
Unbelievable. All right, back to the scores. I had to get that off my chest.
No, it's a fair diversion. So Keenan Allen with a 54.96 vaults into the top 10 for all-time individual player scores in a game for our league's history.
54.96, and he didn't score a touchdown. I know he threw a touchdown to the aforementioned Mike Williams, but how do you score 55 points without scoring a touchdown?
18 receptions on 20 targets for 215 yards. That's how.
What did I say last week? Who deserves 20 plus targets? I told you.
Again,
Keenan Allen, number one.
My biggest concern was that you listed him ahead of Justin Jefferson. Not that he doesn't deserve targets.
Well, this is why. I don't see any 55 points from Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. So this one puts Keenan Allen at the number 3 highest scoring individual week performance in our league's history. And this is not the only performance this week that will be in the top 10.
multiple top 10 performances all time in 1 week.
Yeah.
A lot of
So
points. A lot of points in some of these games.
in addition to Keenan Allen and Mostert having just monster performances, Adam Thielen decided to turn back the clock and put up 38.25 points as well.
Welcome back, Andy Dalton.
Yeah. Andy Dalton also in the lineup for Judd with a 24.29. The rest of Judd's lineup, nice solid production, 25 out of Jordan Love, 24 out of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and everybody else double digits. Solid tight end performances from no one. K-Dot and Taysom Hill, both with 3.85 points, just absolutely atrocious. How did he put up almost 380 points or 280 points?
You don't need tight ends when you have Mostert and Raheem Mostert and Keenan Allen scoring 100 points between the two of them. You don't need tight ends.
Just imagine if he had just 10 points apiece from his tight ends. He'd have been, the top 5 of our all-time scores.
Tight ends don't matter in this league. That's what I've been saying.
Yep. Just
saying
get
this over and over.
get bodies.
Tight ends don't matter.
Anyone. I mean, on the other side of things, we had Kyle Pitts finally making it into Mel's lineup with a 13.45, and his second tight end, as we all expected, was Tanner Hudson with a 7.0.
They picked him up hours before the game.
That's a good pickup.
Good pickup. You got a lineup.
Mel had some solid performances on his team. Jamar Chase finally coming through with a big game. Just a volume performance from Chase, 12 receptions, 141 yards. Ends up with 32 points. No real gigantic pop performances outside of that. Zach Moss with a nice 25-point game. Josh Allen with 22. AJ Brown with a nice bounce back as well, 27.85. I think that was kind of a squeaky wheel gets the grease situation where he seemed unhappy with his target share and production the first couple weeks.
He was definitely letting Jalen Hurts hear it last week.
Yeah. So that was nice to see anyways. So our second highest score of the week came from Big, who, as we mentioned, just made a bunch of additions. Those don't factor into this week's matchup, but they'll be there for his team next week. But he didn't need him this week because he put up 255.81, beating Criddle, who put up 197.28. So Criddle just a few points below that median. Unfortunately, gets 2 losses on the week. But the real story is the massive performances in Big's lineup, similar to those in Judd's. We had a 52.80 performance out of Devon A-Chain, which, as we mentioned with Keenan, putting him into the top 10 all time of individual scores, this bumps A-Chain up to number 6 all time. It would have been number 5 all time, but Keenan Allen jumped ahead of him.
Yeah, just a massive day for a guy that probably wasn't started in many lineup leagues. Thankfully, this is best ball, so you didn't have to guess right on Devon A-Chain. You just have him on your roster and enjoy the points.
Yeah, that might be the formula for him going forward, because that backfield still has Mostert, who obviously, as we just discussed, put up a massive week of his own, so it's not like A-Chain took over the job here.
Mostert also scored 4 touchdowns.
Just an incredible performance from those two. One heck of a performance in Big's lineup, but he also got some really nice weeks out of other guys. Laporta, a massive 8 for 84 and a touchdown, gets 29.4 points at the tight end position. That's a huge advantage.
Yeah, Sam Laporta delivered a true breakout performance. I mean, from a rookie tight end in only his 3rd game, he's been an important piece of this offense where they were going to him a lot on 3rd down. He was converting a lot of those kind of middle of the field plays. This one, he really got loose, showed the full skill set that he had showed at Iowa. One of the reasons that we fell in love with him in the draft process. And speaking of rookie tight ends, Big's other tight end in his lineup was Luke Musgrave, who came through with a 16.4 on 6 receptions, 49 yards. Yeah, a lot of rookies. He's got a lot of rookies on his team, and a lot of them went off today, including the next guy you're going to talk about.
Yep, that would be Tank Dell. One massive long touchdown and a couple other really big plays. Ends up with a 5 receptions, 145 yards and a touchdown, 28.75 points.
This is his group. He's got a lot of talented young players that are going to be probably hit and miss as the season goes, but through the first 3 weeks, it's been more hits than misses, which is what's emboldened him to make these trades and push all his chips in for this year. Can't argue with results like this.
Well, we could try. We like to argue.
That's fair. I'm sure Big would appreciate it.
Only if we do it in chat. So on the other side of things, Criddle with a nice performance from CJ Stroud being the one throwing that ball to Tank Dell. Stroud's looked great as a rookie, and Criddle's got to be happy with that pick he got at 5th overall.
Yeah, it was a tough first week, but since then, the last couple of weeks, he's really put up some big fantasy games, and this week it actually led to a win, which is really nice for Houston.
The story of Criddle's team here is his studs came through pretty well. Christian McCaffrey, 25 points. Chris Olave, 23 points. George Kittle, 22.25 at the tight end position. That's a great performance there. Jalen Hurts with a 21.6. Nice, solid performances from his big names.
Just needs more. That's a tough thing, and why he really was kind of on the outside looking in of the playoff picture on the season preview. He's got some very high-end talent, but there's not a whole lot of supporting pieces. So if his big guys play well, he's still going to have a decent point. He was nearly above the median this week. I mean, right on the fringes of it. But he really needs some other guys to kind of emerge from his bench.
Yeah, and I mean, he did get notable performances from Tutu Atwell and Marvin Mims, but not much outside of that. You know, like 11 points from Tyler Boyd isn't really going to put you over the top.
Yeah, and even Mims now back-to-back big weeks, but
Yep.
It's coming on 25% snap share and, 3 targets every week. So you really can't bank on that kind of production. There's going to be a lot more weeks where it's no points on 3 targets playing, only a handful of snaps.
Well, see, therein lies the genius of Sean Payton. When you can afford to have a guy like Mims only get that 25% snap share, that's how you stay competitive in games like they did against Miami.
Stay within 50. Good job, Peyton.
It's true. Just think, if they upped him to 50% snap share, they might have been able to stay within 25 points. At that point, the sky's the limit. So before we move on, I just want to mention one quick thing. A-Chain was the number 1 running back score of the week, and Laporta was the number 1 tight end score of the week. Both of those guys on Big's team. Last week, I didn't mention it as we got there. I wanted to bring it up. Keenan Allen was the number 1 wide receiver on the week. That was on Judd's team on the last matchup. So with the 3rd highest score of the week, we have my favorite team name, Little Jerry Seinfeld.
My little Jerry.
So Mr. Good News putting up a 239.5, beating Benign Rug with a 163.46. Obviously, as we've mentioned before, Rug not really trying to win any games at this point, so probably not disappointed with the losses.
Yep, the less points he scores, the better his draft pick's going to be next year.
And leading the way for Mr. Good News, we had Kenneth Walker with a 32.35 and Justin Herbert with a 31.05. Just two nice solid performances there. Herbert just slightly behind Tua as the number 2 quarterback this week. And Walker a good ways behind the other guys, but still a very good performance from Walker.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure 32 points is more than all of my running backs have scored combined in 3 weeks. So
I have to ask after that, are you regretting trading away A-Chain?
Well, yeah, of course. I regret all of my trades. They've all worked out so terribly for me, but good for everyone else. So I guess that's good for the rest of the league. Enjoy.
It's kind of you to just fuel the teams of your opponents.
Well, when you trade as often as I do, you're not going to win them all.
As we mentioned before, Mike Williams with the unfortunate season-ending injury, but on his way out the door gets a nice 27.85 for Mr. Good News. I'm sure you'll remember him and this week fondly. Not a ton of other super noteworthy performances really on either side of this matchup. A bit of a down week as things have been reckoned so far for Puka Nakua. Only 15 points. A nice performance from Cortland Sutton for Mr. Good News. On the other side of things, Jordan Addison continues his nice rookie campaign for Rugg. That's really what he's looking to see at this point. Not a ton of big performances over there. Some solid performances from Judy and Gallup and James Conner, who is now out the door, but nothing really noteworthy on his side of the ball. One other thing for Rugg, he did get Wan'Dale Robinson back in New York, so he's got another young wide receiver who's back and has a chance to be productive for him. Not a ton of work for Robinson in his first game, but still nice to see him back out on the field.
I'm sure that's near and dear to your heart, Giants homer.
Yep. And now for the beatdown of the week.
Yeah, we don't need to cover this matchup. That's fine. We can just
our fourth highest score, defending champion JMC, puts a beat down on my co-host with a 231.65 to 178.58. How does that feel?
Feels bad. Not an enjoyable week. I miss week 1 when I could talk trash.
Yeah, you started off 2-0, and it's gone significantly downhill since then.
Yeah, now I'm selling players for pigs. This has not gone the way that I expected.
I actually did want to mention that it may not be the way you should be operating your team to sell players for picks, but you had such a depth at wide receiver that I actually think that extra first-round pick is probably worth more to you.
It's worth more to me in a trade, because players, as good as they are going to have limited markets. They're not going to appeal to every team. A pick could appeal to anyone, people contending, people selling. I usually default towards the pick when it's equal value. I had enough receiver depth, I felt, that I could survive for a few weeks until I figured out what to do with that pick. Obviously did not survive this week. But that was with Calvin Ridley. He didn't help me this week. So
let's talk about how that one happened. The story for JMC is the story for him most weeks. His studs showing up in a big way. Tyreek Hill with a 35.95, joining all those other Miami players just gallivanting towards the end zone every 6 minutes. Seriously, they scored a touchdown every 6 minutes. Deebo Samuel with a nice game, 28.6. Travis Kelce finally showing back up the way Kelce usually does off his snap count, 26.65. Do you feel the need to discuss any Taylor Swift?
Who's Taylor Swift? Who's Taylor Swift play for?
Moving on. For the third straight week, Jonnu Smith has made the lineup for JMC. For the second straight week, Jonnu Smith has scored points, 12.95 points. Sorry, I couldn't say it straight face. 12.95 from his tight end too. Obviously, Kelce being back is the big news for him, but
normally not stiff competition for him to get in the lineup at his tight end 2 spot. But this week he had a pretty good game. I mean, he outscored Mark Andrews. So, I
mean, as you said, not tough to get in there. He literally only has to outscore one person, and that would be Mike Gesicki. If he outscores Mike Gesicki, he's in the lineup. On the other side of things, you got a massive week out of Tua. Like I said before, he was the number 1 scoring quarterback on the week, 32.36, distributing the ball in Miami. Unfortunately for him, the running backs combined for 8 touchdowns, so a lot of those were non-passing touchdowns.
Right. He still had 4 touchdowns passing. I mean, to be fair, 2 of them were little shovel passes to A-Chain that didn't involve a lot of Tua effort, but they still count in the stat sheet as passing touchdowns. So I'll take them. I could have used about 10 more this week if I wanted to be competitive.
You had a good week out of Justin Jefferson as well. 32 points on 7 receptions, 149 yards, got his first touchdown. Just a big week there.
Finally found the end zone after 500 receiving yards this year. But the problem was that's where it ended. Nobody else did anything on my team, and that's why I was one of the lowest scores of the week.
That first round pick finally going to waste. Shaheed not making your lineup this week. Just tragedy.
Hey, he scored a punt return touchdown. Thankfully, we get that special teams bump. Otherwise, he would have got a 0 this week.
I'm going to say those were the only points that he scored. No catches this week at all.
No, well, Hopefully we get the Jameis Winston revenge game narrative. He gets some deep shots into Shaheed.
One other thing, just really quick, that I want to note for JMC is at his super flex spot filled by Chris Moore. I did not know Chris Moore was on the Titans until about 30 seconds ago. I don't know about you.
Yes, I was aware that Chris Moore is the fourth receiver for the Tennessee Titans. He really caught basically one pass. He had one like 35-yard pass and then another short one later, but that was enough. JMC, again, has a very shallow team, but when his stars score like this, it really doesn't matter because he can get a week winning performance out of 4 or 5 guys. He doesn't even need the rest of the lineup spots, clearly.
All right, our next highest scoring team was my team. I beat Flea with a 204.31 to 188.40.
That's no way to treat our guest this week.
I was going to say later on we have an interview with Flea wherein I assured her that she was beating me and going to beat me.
You liar.
Oops. No, honestly, so part of it was I had traded away Thomas already, so he wasn't appearing on my lineup when I went to view it, but he had already played, so he's locked in there, and that was a starter in my lineup. And part of it was I wasn't truly adding everything up. I was just looking at it, eyeballing it, and I honestly didn't think that my team was going to make it over 150, let alone to 200.
So what you're telling me is that you're a liar and you're bad at math.
Yes, both of those things are apparently accurate. The 204.31 that I scored was 0.28 above the league median, just squeaking over there for that extra bonus win. Flea, unfortunately, just under there at 188 for the bonus loss. Bonus. Loss. My team, big performances out of Mahomes and Cousins. Outside of that, nothing really notable in my opinion. Stephon Diggs with his usual mid-20s performance.
You hate talking about your own matchup.
I really do. Anyway, let's talk about Flea's team. Nice performances from ETN and Shark, both over 20. TJ Hawkinson continues his good season, 21 points. Donald Parham with the best stat line I have ever seen of any tight end. 2 receptions on 2 targets for 4 yards and 2 touchdowns.
His season of dominance from the 1-yard line continues.
It's amazing. The unfortunate story for Flea's team this week is she lost Derek Carr to the injury. Matthew Stafford had a down game against Cincinnati. She's still missing Anthony Richardson. So really, at quarterback, just not much doing there. She had Minshew in her quarterback starting spot with a 10.58. You're not going to win many matchups when you get that low of a performance from all your quarterbacks combined.
Her team is pretty shallow to begin with. So to be down so many impactful players, even a guy like Justice Hill, who's gotten in the lineup the first couple of weeks, being out, on top of Anthony Richardson, her best quarterback. And a couple other guys had down weeks, like Devonta Smith. I mean, if she's not getting big performances from all her studs on a weekly basis,
Darren Waller,
players like that, it's going to be difficult for her to put up a lot of points. The first couple of weeks, she's had some surprise bench performances to kind of supplement the star scoring, which is why she got off to the 4-0 start. But unfortunately, this is the other side of the coin where if the studs don't play well and she doesn't get the surprise bench performances, she's going to end up like me and get the bonus loss.
The silver lining of it is she didn't have a disaster of a week. She's probably not going to lose a ton of ground in the points for category. So, she's 4-2. This is her first loss of any kind. She gets the 2 losses, unfortunately, but she's not going to lose that much ground in the tiebreakers.
Yeah, and these guys that are injured or ineffective, these are not long-term injuries or long-term concerns.
Stafford will be bounced back. Richardson hopefully comes back soon. Same for Carr. If they don't, she might have to try and add some short-term help there, but at least she's got Minshew to cover for Richardson until he gets back. All right, our last matchup to cover this week is Flinch beating out Georgia Mike with a 203.74 to 95.98. Once again, congratulations to Flinch for the largest margin of victory.
And congratulations to Georgia Mike for, again, scoring the lowest points of the week.
I'm sensing a theme.
He is accomplishing his weekly duties with aplomb.
So we've mentioned some massive scores in the Minnesota and Miami games, but there was one other massive score on the week that didn't come from those games. It was Davante Adams, who put up 13 receptions, 172 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Vegas against the Steelers. And that performance took place on Flinch's roster.
Speaking of guys who deserve 20 targets a game.
Yeah. Absolute showing out from Davante Adams, proving that he's still one of the best wide receivers in the league. And he is apparently very unhappy with the Raiders and their current trajectory.
Yeah, I would be too if I was stuck on that roster with that horrible coaching, poorly run organization.
Outside of Adams, the two big performances for Flinch came from the quarterback position. Lamar with a 26.68 and Deshaun Watson with a 21.16. It's a pretty solid performance from Watson compared to what we've been seeing.
Welcome to the NFL season, Deshaun Watson. About time. Only took a few weeks before he decided to finally show up, earn some of that money he's being paid.
Solid performances from some of the depth pieces for Flinch. Pacheco, 16 points. George Pickens, 14.5. Tight end position, Gerald Everett finally having a good game, 14.5. Jimmy Graham showing up, 1 reception, 8 yards, 1 touchdown. Move over Donald Parham.
Gotta love best ball, especially a 2 tight end, 1.75 tight end premium best ball, where Jimmy Graham can break into a lineup with 1 reception. All it takes is just, if you get a tight end that gets in the end zone, he's probably going to be in the lineup that week.
A few disappointing performances from some big names on Flinch's team. Russell Wilson continues to be Russell Wilson, but Breece Hall just absolutely shut down by the New England defense. Derrick Henry absolutely stonewalled by the Cleveland defense. That Cleveland defense looks legit.
They've really embarrassed some teams early on in the season after what they did to Cincinnati week 1 and what they did this week to Tennessee. Even the game that they lost against Pittsburgh really was a bunch of defensive touchdowns that Watson gave to the Steelers. That was the only way they generated any points. No one's really been able to move the ball against Cleveland Browns at all. So that might be a matchup to avoid going forward for fantasy purposes. And for Big's benefit, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Georgia Mike's running back 1, Rico Dowdle. Got in the end zone this week.
Dowdle just does continue to show up and get snaps there. And this week he actually produced enough to make a lineup.
Yeah, Dowdle would have been my running back 1 this week if he was on my roster. So something for me to ponder. I'm sure he's on the trade block.
You don't need to say things like that. Charbonnet, his running back 2 this week from your team.
I should have traded for Dowdle instead of Gibbs. Would have got more points this week.
Worth noting for Georgia Mike is a down week from some of his rookie and second year players. Jaden Reed not doing a whole heck of a lot. Drake London another down week after the big week last week. Quentin Johnson still not really getting that snap share just yet. Got the opportunity now with that Mike Williams injury that we've discussed before.
Yeah, they're going to be forced to play him now. They were trying to ease him in, according to Coach Brendan Staley, but they don't have that option anymore.
Well, sometimes that's the impetus that it takes for those rookie wide receivers to actually take that leap, is when they're forced into a larger role and they either sink or swim. I think that about wraps it up for the matchups. Again, an interesting week. Some big scores, not a ton of super close matchups, but some impressive individual performances.
A few for the record books.
And it's that time of the podcast. Let's check in on those updated playoff odds.
Oh, I don't know if I want to look at those this week. I've been trending in the wrong direction.
Last week, you said you were going to find us a new site because you weren't the top one anymore. This week, I'm not sure you can find a site where you're the top one anymore. Updated odds leading the way with a 99% chance to make the playoffs is the team that has declared he is selling everyone, JMC.
Yeah, I'm not so sure he's going to go through with that plan anymore.
He is currently 6-0, projected to finish at the top of the standings. Again, I should have mentioned this at the top. We're using Dynasty Daddy for these projections. They are not our own. They are what we are basing all of this off of. So a 99% chance to make the playoffs for JMC.
I don't think he's going to want to sell anymore.
Number 2 percentage chance to make the playoffs is Judd with a 93%. He's currently sitting at 5-1, so pretty standard there. It's what you expect to see, especially after the massive performance from his team this week. You know that what they're capable of now.
Right. He's shown that his team has so far the highest ceiling of any team in the league.
Number 3 with an 88% chance to make the playoffs is Mr. Good News, currently sitting at 4-2. Nice solid hold steady for Mr. Good News there.
Despite the waves of injury, he's somehow still looking like one of the top contenders, one of the early locks for the playoffs. Hasn't lost any ground since the offseason projections.
Well, speaking of losing ground, the number 4 projection is your team, whereas after week 1 you were the top projection. Now you're down at number 4 here at 81% chance to make the playoffs. Still a very high likelihood, but not as high as it was considering that you're now 2-4 to start the season.
Yeah, those odds are going to continue to go down if I continue to go 0-2 on a weekly basis.
Just after you, we have Flinch at 74% chance to make the playoffs, currently sitting at 3-3. This is where the tier break is, so Flinch, the last of the guys at that 3/4 mark or better.
Yeah, similar to what we saw in the offseason. He's in roughly the same spot in that kind of back end of the top end teams.
After that, these two projections are right next to each other, but based on what these two teams did this week, I'm not sure it's accurate. Number 6 is Big at 58%, currently sitting at 5-1, and sitting at number 7 at a 54% chance to make the playoffs, also at 5-1, is my team. So those two teams, both currently 5-1, listed as a 58% and 54% chance to make the playoffs. Obviously,
feels like you're heading in different directions.
Yeah,
after the last couple of days, but you are both still 5-1.
It's true. It's a very different 5-1 in my opinion. But who are we to argue with Dynasty Daddy?
I would like to be 5-1 right now. If you would like to trade records with me,
I don't think we can do that.
Is that something that we can do? No.
You talk to the commish, see what's allowed. I don't know that win trading is allowed, but you look into that and report back next week.
I'm sure that he would also like to trade records right now.
That's a fair point. He would probably trade records with you.
Yes. Unfortunately, the only preseason contender that's started slower than my team is Mel's.
So coming in at number 8 is Flea with a 26% chance to make the playoffs. She's currently got a 4-2 record, but we discussed this last week. I just, when we get down here, I don't like the gap between my team and Big's team at that like coin flip and this level, this tier. That Dynasty ranks so much lower. She's got to be in that same tier. She has to be.
She's the only team above 500 that does not have at least a 50-50 shot of making the playoffs. So it feels strange to see her at 4-2 and only a 27% chance.
And right behind her is Mel's team with a 21% chance to make the playoffs at 1-5. I have a tough time seeing two teams that have had some good weeks and some not, and basically one bad week, being separated by 3 wins at this early of a stage, but only being separated by 5%. I don't know what to make of this.
Hey, don't ask me to math, okay? That's why we're using the site, so I don't have to do these odds on my own, because it would not be good.
10, 11, 12 spots are Criddle, Georgia Mike, and Benign Rug. Criddle with a 4% chance to make the playoffs. Georgia Mike and Benign Rug with both less than 1%. I'm always fascinated to see how these keep evolving, and it seems to like jump back and forth from week to week.
Yeah, but for the most part, the preseason contenders are all still at the top, minus Mel. And really the risers have been Big, who team has played great the first couple of weeks, and now he's added more pieces. So it makes sense that he would be rising in the odds. But the guys at the bottom have, besides him, have really stayed at the bottom.
It's interesting to note to me that even with those recent additions, Big is still listed as in the frisky tier, which is one level below the actual contender tier. It's also worth noting that my team dropped from contender down to frisky, which I assume was a combination of several injuries and also trading away a significant player in Michael Thomas.
I believe, based on Dynasty Daddy's tier definitions, he's still in that frisky category because his overall team value rank is very high, up to number 2 overall. But his starter rank is still only 7th. So he's kind of towing that line where he's carrying a lot of value on his roster, but not a lot of real top end value-wise talent. So in best ball, I mean, you can get away with not having super high starter ranks if you have a lot of depth, because we know in best ball depth plays. So I think that's what's helped him lead to these wins. And then he's made some moves to add some higher end talent this week.
Well, that brings us to the end of the week 3 recap, but we are delighted to announce that we have the first of our manager interviews. Flea Flickers was nice enough to agree to come on and listen to us ramble and to answer a few of our questions. So we hope you'll all enjoy listening to us talk to our first manager and to find out a little bit more about everyone in our league. Without any further ado, here's that interview.
Hey guys.
Welcome in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for taking the time. We were looking forward to meeting everyone, but it's nice. You're our first person who actually is here. It's exciting.
Excellent.
No one wanted to go first. I talked to everybody and they're like, no, we'll see how it goes and then we'll decide if we want to do this.
I'm good as long as I don't have to run the podcast. I have no problem being on.
Yeah. You're good. You're the star today. We're just going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Okay, excellent. Fire away.
Why don't you start off there, Ryan?
All right. Well, I mean, the first thing that I want to know from everybody is how you got into fantasy football. Where did it start?
So, funny story. I've hated football my whole life.
That's a great start. That's a great start.
My ex-husband loved it. My current husband loved it. And he got invited into a fantasy football league, and a friend of my daughter's actually invited him. And I thought, I wonder if that might make it a little bit more fun on Sundays. Maybe I should play too, just see what it's like. And I've been a fanatic ever since.
Nice.
My husband now comes to me for advice on teams and players.
There you go.
So how long ago was that you started?
Probably 7 years ago, I think. Okay. Yeah. So I went from playing in one league to the next year I started my own league, and the following year I started my own dynasty league. So now I run 2 leagues, and then I'm in probably 25 leagues.
Oh, it's a slippery slope.
Well, to be fair, half of them are best ball leagues that I don't have to do anything with but draft a team. So I don't really get those. But I'm in probably 7 dynasty leagues.
Nice. That's a good number right there. That's a big jump from 7 years to 7 dynasty leagues and then 25 overall leagues.
Well, I had to quit working 11 years ago for health reasons. And when I was working, I was super competitive, in my work environment. And so when I left, I didn't really have a channel for that. So I think that fantasy football filled that for me.
It's definitely a good outlet for that.
Yeah. I tried channeling it through my kids, but it wasn't quite the same.
Those poor children. She's got them lined up, racing them around the house.
All right, so your team name is the Big Salad, and obviously the whole league is Seinfeld based, themed, I should say, not based. So tell us how you chose that name and anything else you want to about your Seinfeld watching experience.
I watched Seinfeld. I watched all of Seinfeld, not necessarily continuously. I watched it in, fits and starts, but I did end up watching all of it. And for some reason, the Big Salad episode stuck with me. And when I was trying to think of a name, that's what came to me. So that was the only reason.
Nice. It's a good reason right there. If it sticks out to you and it brings you back to experiencing the episode, it's nice to remember.
Yeah, for sure. I will say that this league has made me want to re-binge the series.
Yeah, same.
Because of all the references.
we were hoping to get Mel on first to ask him about everyone that he's invited into the league. But in lieu of asking him, how did you end up getting invited to this league by Mel? Or was it Mel that invited you?
You know, to be quite honest, I can't remember.
All right. It's reasonable.
But there's a couple members of the league. If I look at the members, I could probably tell you which ones I play with in other leagues.
Yeah, I know Big said he was in other leagues with you.
Big is one of them. I thought Mel was in another one with me, and maybe that's where I got the invite.
That would make sense.
I honestly don't recall, but I'm glad I did because it's been a blast.
Right. Yeah, this is it's been a fun league for sure.
Well, your guys' podcast has taken it up a level, I gotta say. It's like really fun. I love listening to them every week.
We were definitely inspired by this league. It's worthy of a podcast in our minds, at least. Hopefully the other members of the league enjoy listening to it.
I think so. I mean, I have one other league where people kind of toyed with that, and it just adds another dimension to it. It makes it more fun. You're not just setting your, teams every week. You're actually getting to know some of the people you play with, which I like.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to do this, honestly.
So Cindy, you say you're retired, right?
Yes.
What did you do for work before?
I was in IT. I worked for a winery, Gallo Winery. You guys may have heard of them.
Oh yeah, Gallo Winery.
Mm-hmm.
I have. I've drank their wine.
They're you've probably drank some of their wines and didn't even know it because they have a ton of labels that don't have their name on it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, they're based out of Modesto, which is about 45 minutes from me. Hour 45 minutes.
I say I should tell my mother that she's the big wine drinker in my family.
It was a great company.
I never drank wine until I started working for Bevmo. See.
Oh yeah.
I worked there and they sent me to a wine tasting for the job. Allegedly it was for the job, right? To learn the products. And we got through the wine tasting, and by the end, after about a 3-hour session, everybody else's spit buckets were full and ours was completely empty. We didn't realize that we were just supposed to taste it and then spit it into the bucket. So, the first few wines were good, but towards the end, they were all amazing. They got high scores. I don't remember any of them, but
that's the danger of wine tasting, because usually you start buying bottles towards the end of your day and you get them home and you drink them and you're like, what the hell
what was I thinking?
What's your rooting interest in the actual NFL? Do you have a favorite team?
Well, my husband's a Raider fan, so I generally cheer for them when a game's on, just for him. But I honestly am a fan of whoever team I have the most fantasy players on.
That's the right answer.
And
we cheer for our players.
I honestly like the underdog. I love to see teams that are either underestimated or struggling, to see them break out. That makes me happy. Yeah. Most of the time they have one or two of my players on, given that I'm in so many leagues.
Right.
You're rooting for the narrative here.
Yeah.
Well, that definitely describes your team so far this year. We did the season preview and we thought that, we liked your starters. Thought it was a shallow team, but we said, if the starters produce, this team's got a good chance, better than what the odds that were given by Dynasty Daddy.
Yeah.
And so far, I haven't looked at the results from this week yet, but the first
she's going to
could have gone much better the first 2 weeks.
She's going to win.
I'm going to win probably, but I don't know if I'm going to make the median, because
that's fair.
I had a lot of underperforming teams, but or players. But I did have a few in my bench that will bring my number up a little bit. So.
In case you were curious how I was sure that she was going to win again so quickly, we played each other this week. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I've been keeping an eye on the score of that one.
He's keeping track. He knows for sure.
I know. I keep peeking at your bench to make sure I'm not missing something.
There's no one
surprise on.
Yeah. I'm gonna get like a bump from Cousins, and then that's about it. There's not much else going on there.
I didn't realize that you guys were facing each other. That was well timed then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Waller's actually going to end up in my bench.
Oh, is he? I haven't looked.
He only scored me like 7 points, and I think it's Parham is the one that is going to take his place.
Oh yeah, he had a good game.
You're welcome. It was for me.
Thanks for that.
2 receptions, 4 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now that is a line.
He has 3 touchdowns on the season on like 6 targets.
Yeah. It helps when you're 12 feet tall.
Exactly.
It can leap through the roof.
Gigantor.
I think I pretty much had to beg you to trade him in that trade. We were kind of going back and forth on that because you really
You
liked him.
you wanted him thrown in, and I loved him because the Chargers were my team out here until they moved away and broke my heart. So
When he
So I did
encouraged
like
you,
Parham.
when he encouraged you a moment ago to just root for players and not a team, it's because he's still bitter about San Diego losing their team. It's the
Yes.
entire reason behind
I
it.
will be bitter forever. You don't understand.
Well, think about how my husband feels. He was an Oakland Raider fan, then he
Oh,
was an
man.
LA Raider fan, now he's
Yeah.
a Vegas Raider fan. It's like,
The Raider fans, they're just used to it. I don't understand. They lost no fan base. The Chargers are dead to San Diego right now. We are actively rooting against them at every opportunity. The Raiders can move as much as they want, and they don't care.
Yeah,
The
no,
fans are like, yeah,
it's
it's
true.
fine.
The fans just seem to migrate with them. They don't seem to care in the slightest.
it's very true. He's very judgy of people that trade loyalties. He's like, I'm a fan. It doesn't matter what they do.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, but back to my team. I think I've been lucky. I think my producers have produced, and I've had enough bench players to fill the gaps when the producers haven't. So far so good. But we'll
Yeah,
see.
it's been good. It was fun
Yeah.
to watch you flip that switch in the off season from trying to accumulate as many picks as possible to then getting rid of all of the picks as fast as possible for players.
Yeah.
No,
It
it
was a
wasn't. I
whirlwind.
didn't really do it deliberately that way. I honestly had planned on keeping the picks for the draft, and then
Mhm.
I listened to a lot of podcasts about strategy and stuff, and I've listened to some strategies about why bother keeping a 4th round pick for an unknown player that probably won't produce when you can go and get a veteran that is going to produce at least some of the time and use the
Yeah.
pick on that. So I kind of decided to adopt that strategy with my later round pick.
It's definitely smart and something that I do similarly.
Yeah.
The late round picks are
You're talking to guys who made 2 picks in the draft combined. And we appreciate that philosophy right there.
I mean especially the late round picks, those are really you're talking about
Really dicey.
low odds, but sometimes they turn into Puka Nakua, so you have to be careful.
I've actually, since I've started playing, I've had good success with my sort of long shot picks. I picked up James Robinson the year that he was going off. I picked him up in almost every single league.
Yep.
Ended up doing really well with him, and I've had some other players too. David Johnson, I picked him up before he was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually on my very first fantasy football team. So
I'm sure that was a fun experience. I remember the peak
it was
David
great.
Johnson years.
It was great. It didn't work out so well in later years, but
Oh well.
that one year he really came through.
Now I've got to ask, Al, do you remember who was on your first fantasy team?
My first fantasy team?
Yeah, bring us back.
That was more than 20 years ago. So probably I probably like Aaron Brooks, former Saints quarterback. He was on a lot of my teams in the early days.
This explains
Adam
why you
most
bought
of
an
his
Aaron
career.
Brooks jersey when we went to a Saints game.
Well, yeah. Plus, it was like $2. So
So you've been playing since you had to do the scores manually?
yeah, I've been playing since
Add
before.
paper?
So we've been playing on Yahoo for over 20 years. I started playing before Yahoo had fantasy sports, before ESPN had fantasy sports. I think it was NFL.com was the only place that had it online.
Yeah. Wow.
I think that's when I started. I've been playing for a long time. I roped this guy in when we were in college.
It's true. He dragged me in circa 2006. I'd played fantasy baseball before that, but never football.
So that's how
Yes.
you guys knew each other at college?
Yeah.
Yeah, I started fantasy baseball too. Even before that, fantasy baseball
Yeah.
was for sure done by hand.
I did
with a
fantasy
newspaper.
baseball by hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought about doing fantasy soccer.
Oh, that's too much for me.
I know guys who do certain soccer leagues, but I've never looked into it closely.
Well, you're going to laugh, but I'm a huge fan of Ted Lasso, and it makes me think I'm missing something about soccer. So that maybe I should start watching it because maybe it'll be exciting.
Talk to Jarsal. He plays every
I was
Wednesday.
gonna
That's
say,
why we have to record on Tuesdays.
This is true. I play in an over 30 league, and all the guys that I play with are obsessed with watching the Premier League, and all of them love Ted Lasso. They always tell me I should watch it, and I'm like, yeah, maybe. I'm sure it's a good show, but
It's an amazing show. It's beyond good. And it's not just about soccer.
that's what they always say. And then they always but the problem is they ask me in the same breath, "Oh, did you catch the game?" And I'm like, "No, I don't watch soccer. I play soccer. I love soccer, but I don't want to watch it." You mentioned that you root for all your players across your different leagues. What player? Who you have the most shares of? Who's on the most teams?
I play in a lot of Superflex leagues, and early on in their careers, I picked up Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Oh, so that's worked out well.
That's a good combination to have heavily rostered.
That combo's worked out really well for me. It's been broken up in some of the leagues since I originally drafted him, but yeah, all the leagues that I drafted Josh Allen in, I never dropped it. I never traded him or dropped him. So I stuck with him, and I felt pretty good for sticking with him because he was such a hot mess that first year.
He was really bad. I saw him play against San Diego State when he was at Wyoming, and I could not believe that he even got drafted because he was so bad. And then he looked like he shouldn't have been drafted for a while, and he just kind of blossomed. It's crazy. And really, the NFL's been chasing it ever since. You keep seeing them take guys in that mold that are not as developed as you'd like, and thinking, oh, we can fix this guy. We just take him with physical tools. And they got burned so many times. I think that was a lot of the people's issues with Anthony Richardson this year, when in reality, Anthony Richardson was very refined. He had one of the historically low rates of taking sacks. I know he didn't play a lot, but he showed a lot of the traits that really translate well into the NFL. And it's been good early results. I'm sure you're happy trading up, making that big move.
Really happy, actually. In fact, chatting with you about him made me feel better about taking him with my second pick, because I had the same concerns that other people had about his, the fact that he, that everybody was saying is so raw and it's going to take all this time. And given his draft capital and the fact that the, Colts took a chance on him, your comments, I thought about it a little bit and decided to go ahead and pull the trigger. But
so you're saying I sabotaged myself? Because I was trying to trade up to get that pick. That's why I was trying to figure out who you were going to take, because I wanted to trade up to the number 2 pick.
But I wouldn't tell you. And
I know you wouldn't. And then you took both of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sabotage myself. See that? I can't keep my mouth shut.
I don't think you had quite the ammo that she did to jump up and get the extra. Like she already had 102.
No,
I don't think you didn't have the ammo to get to the 101 like she did.
That's
I was
fair.
like so thrilled when I was approached to, hey, are you interested in getting the 101? I'm like, hell yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk. Worked out
there
well.
was only so many teams that could even have made that trade.
Yeah.
Let alone have the gall to pull it off.
It was just, I don't know, things just fell right. And I don't know how things are going to play out this year. It's a long season, but I feel good about, like, compared to where I was last year, compared to how I am now, like the fact that I can even have a chance to be where I'm at right now.
Right.
I'm amazed.
Yeah, well, you got the 2 best prospects in the draft, and we
both
thought when we did the rookie draft recap, we were saying these 2 are probably going to be instant impact players just based on their profiles, and they sure have so far.
Yep.
It worked out well. Although Bijan didn't have a very good week this week, but I think that'll change.
Yeah, it's all right. One down game against a tough run defense isn't much cause for concern.
If you're soured on him, let me know. I can put a package together for you.
I'm not soured yet, but I'll let you. You'll be the first to know.
That's all I want. That's all I want.
That's
As
just
long as
because he
I'm on the
won't leave
list.
any of us alone.
I have to pay him back eventually for the cool players that he's traded me and the hot hits on the draft. So
Yeah, Kendrick Bourne's worked out pretty well too, huh?
Oh,
yeah.
I tried to trade him to Jarsal first, and he wouldn't take the deal.
I
So
had-
you can thank him.
I had that trade sitting in my inbox for probably 2 weeks, and every time I look at it, be like, I should just do this. I like Bourne. He's worth more than a 5th, but like, I don't want to give up my last pick. I don't know. It was dumb.
Who are you going to get in the 5th round that would have been better than him?
Apparently,
Right,
Payne
John.
Durham. Who knew?
Is he inactive tonight again?
Yeah. No,
Oh.
again.
It's tough to beat out Keefe.
Shout out to Mel having him on the roster for a minute and a half before dropping him back on the waivers.
At least we got to cover it on the waiver show.
Yeah, no, that was a riveting section.
I was laughing to myself when Justice Hill got elevated because I got him from you, and
Also from me. Mm-hmm. Yes.
and he's actually one of the players I drafted heavily in his rookie year, and he didn't work out. And so it's hard to let that go. When you hot on a player,
Yeah.
it's really hard to let that go, even if it's proven to you over and over again that they're not going to do it.
Denzel Mims.
I traded in
I know the feeling.
I'm in a 32 team league, and
32 team league. Is it a two-player copy, or just a straight 32 team?
It's a straight 32 team league, but they don't have a quarterback slot. They have a super flex slot, so you have the option of not playing.
I'm in a similar.
Yeah, so
It's going well.
I took on an orphan that was a freaking hot mess, and this hasn't. It was my first rebuild, so it hasn't been smooth sailing. But I have a fairly good. It's an IDP league, so I have a very good defensive roster, but my offensive is a mess. But I did trade for Kareem Hunt back when he was on a team last year, and then when he got dropped, I just kind of held him, see what happens, and then as soon as the Browns picked him up again, I put him on the trade block, and I managed to trade him and like Khalif Raymond, I think it was, or no, it was Matt Collins. I traded him and Matt Collins for Denzel Mims.
You have Marvin.
Marvin Mims.
Sorry,
Mims.
Marvin Mims.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, you didn't trade that for Denzel Mims, right?
I was confused for a second.
Marvin Mims.
No, that's much better. That's a great trade.
That's a really good trade.
Yeah, that was a good trade. Sorry.
I went from being confused to impressed.
Yeah. I was like, what year are we talking about? Denzel Mims. Not right now.
It's just a few days ago. And then he went and scored me 28 points. And I got my highest score. The other fun thing that happened in that 32 team league is I had Andy Dalton in my bench, and I was setting all my teams, going through all my rosters. And I'm like, oh, Andy Dalton's going to play. I can put him over my Superflex slot. And he scored me like 38 points.
That's a lineup, not a best ball.
It's a lineup. Yeah.
Oh, dang.
Oh, that's tough.
It's a tough league.
That's intense right there. Yeah, the one that I'm in a 32 team league, but it's just a redraft best ball. So I don't have to do anything. I just kind of take a look at it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this one's heavy duty.
I'm gonna have to try one of those. I like that idea.
You're on your own.
If they're opening, I'll let you know.
Sounds good.
Usually we lose a couple players every year because
with that many managers, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
Wacky leagues like that, or even like ours, where you're starting like two tight ends. It's always neat when you got a little bit of a twist on the traditional format.
I like the challenge. I'm in so many leagues. I like to have a couple of different styles. Like I joined my first, like 2 years ago, I joined my first keeper league. I've never been in a keeper league before.
I've never done a keeper. Done Dynasty, never done a keeper.
I've done Dynasty, redraft, keeper, in a guillotine league this year. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
How's
that one going? You looking like you're safe for a while?
Well, I haven't been getting stellar scores, but it's been enough to, stay afloat.
Yep.
And I don't think I'll make it to the end. Honestly, I don't have a strong enough team unless there's like major injuries, but never wish for that. So, but I'll stick it as long as I can. The nice thing about it though, is that every time a player gets eliminated, their entire roster goes on the waiver.
Yep.
So you get to bid on players and improve your team.
So is it all fab bidding on that one?
Yeah. And they gave us $1,000 fab. So you can go nuts. Like the first team that got eliminated had Josh Allen as their quarterback.
Ooh. Yeah. So somebody bid big on him, I assume.
He went for like $600. But I already had Lamar Jackson. So I thought that it would be, I already had a top tier quarterback. So I didn't bid on, or at least I didn't bid as much as I needed to acquire him.
Yeah, especially when there's going to be good players on the wire every week.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's not like this league where there's no one ever on the wire.
I know. I think there was some chat earlier about making waiver claims. I'm like, there's like no waiver claims to be made. I mean, there's literally nobody out there.
We just said Kokeeft was available. Come on.
Yeah, I just saw Pharaoh Brown scored well this week, so maybe people will come back over him.
Those blocking tight ends,
That was the slowest long touchdown I've ever seen.
I still look. You never know. I still look, especially in this league where, even if you get like one guy make it to your starting roster a year, it's worth picking him up.
Exactly. It's nice about best ball. You don't have to make a decision to start them. Just stick them anywhere on your roster. And if they produce, then they're in.
Exactly.
Either one of you got any football related stuff? Because I want to ask about books in a minute.
All right. Yeah, we can jump right into the
Go for it.
fantasy books.
Well, I mean, it was a good discussion with like the entire league was all of a sudden talking about fantasy books and like everyone's jumping in. So
that's what's funny about this league. I get so many freaking notifications about in this league, like, and it's constant.
Yeah.
Like, bing, 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 and then I happened to glance at it and I saw Wheel of Time and it was like, ding. I had to jump in on that one.
I know the secret to draw her in now.
Yeah, that's right. So, what's your favorite fantasy series then?
Probably straight up like epic fantasy. I would say Wheel of Time is my favorite series for sure. I mean, I've got others that are up there. That's my favorite straight up fantasy series. I also like the Outlander books by Dan Gabaldon. They have like elements of fantasy, but they're not like straight up fantasy.
How far into Wheel of Time have you gotten? I haven't.
I'm on book 11. Hold on, let me count.
I think 11.
11.
All right, so you're getting pretty close.
You're going to love the Brandon Sanderson last 3 books.
That's the next book, right?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
I haven't gotten to that one yet.
12, 13, 14 are all Sanderson with parts that Jordan wrote before he passed and extensive notes of his.
He was very true to the notes and the words of Robert Jordan, but you can definitely tell it's his style.
Yeah.
When you read him, especially as much as I have.
And you said you were a Sanderson fan as well. You've gone through most of his stuff.
After I read those last 3 books, I went back and read like everything I could get my hands on that he had written, and I've loved all of it.
When I heard that he was going to finish it, that's when I jumped in. I was like, I got to find out more about this guy. So I started reading all his stuff that was available then, and that's how I found out essentially that he was a good author as well.
He's really good. Have you read the Stormlight Archive?
Yep, I'm up to date on Stormlight. It's one that I very much enjoy, but I have not reread the same way that I reread other series. So like
I reread it if a new book comes out. It's not a series I think I'll reread on a regular basis once it's concluded, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so basically anytime I'm in a series, if a new book comes out, I kind of have to, I don't have to refresh, but I want to. I go back and I reread the whole thing anyways. I did that with the first 3 Stormlight, but then for the last, is it 4 that are out now, right? Just 4?
I think so, yeah.
For the 4th one, I didn't reread the first 3 beforehand. I just was like, I'm just gonna hop right in. And it was all right. I managed.
That's a pretty convoluted series, though. I would need the continuity, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. He brings a lot of different threads in.
Yeah.
This is the difference between the planning out authors and the mapping out and the discovery writers. That's always an interesting dynamic there.
That's when I discover a new series of books, I always check to see if they're completely written
Yeah.
before I embark on them, because I get so frustrated when I get halfway through it and it's like, oh, you're not going to read the next one for another 2 years.
Still waiting on Rothfuss to finish up.
Yeah. How many years has it been?
I think he's about a dozen. I don't know the exact number.
And that's your fault because you turned me onto that one. Thanks.
Did I? Yeah. That's what I'm here for.
Diana Gabaldon averages about 4 to 5 years in between books because it's historical fictions and she's very well researched. So all of her books are very historically accurate. So it takes her a lot of time to write them.
That'll slow you down if you got to be accurate.
She weaves the storylines into the historical events. So it's excellent read, but it's very frustrating. Every time I read one, I think it's going to be the last book in the series, and I hear, oh no, she's going to do 3 more. It's like, oh, you're killing me.
That's pretty cool.
Mike Evans caught a touchdown.
Did he?
Just now, just a 1 year. Yeah, right in the goal line.
He's also playing against you. Just saying.
We get some in redraft too.
Live trash talking. Yeah, this is what we came for.
So I already told you she was going to win this week, isn't it? This is not shocking if anyone was noticing that she started the season 4-0.
I need to make that median. I don't think it's going to happen though.
Well, then you get to hear our bonus loss clip.
Ugh.
The sounder that he did not tell me he was making.
So tastefully done. He said it jokingly, and then I saved it and repurposed it.
So be careful with anything you say on here. He will save it and use it again. All right. So do you have any other fantasy series you want to recommend? Because you've got a captive audience right now when we're playing this.
Well, I grew up reading Mercedes Lackey books, but I've been rereading them, kind of going back through her Valdemar series, and they're entertaining. I'm not gonna say it's as entertaining as it was when I was a teenager, so I'm not sure that I'd recommend that. I've got some science fiction books. I don't know if you read much science fiction. Craig Alanson does a series called The Expeditionary Force. And it's a pretty long series. There's a lot of books in it. R.C. Bray narrates that one too, but each book is around 16 hours of audiobook.
Nice.
And it's super funny. It's like the storyline's really good, but it also makes you laugh too. It's got this like AI unit that is a wise ass. So it's really funny from that perspective. So I recommend that one.
Well, we're glad you're a part of our league. We're glad that you could, join us tonight, and hopefully everyone will enjoy hearing from you.
I appreciate you having me. I hope I gave you the information you were looking for.
I don't even know what information. We wanted to meet you. We wanted to experience the league in a new way.
I like it. It's gonna be fun.
Al, you got anything to close up with?
1 down, 9 to go.